Tell the room your call sign, sweetheart, since you're sitting like you've got one. Princess Cupcake? Honey Bunch? The laughter came fast. 4 junior Marines, a half-circle of compliance, a Gunnery Sergeant 3 drinks into the performance of himself. The bar was half full, dark wood, framed unit colors, the low amber of overhead lights that had not been replaced since a previous decade. It was 19:30 on a Wednesday at the Camp Pendleton Officers Club, 90 minutes past the duty day bell, and Gunnery Sergeant Cole Bracken had found his audience and his target in the same room. She did not look up immediately. She let the laughter run its course the way a person lets a car alarm run, present, registered, irrelevant. Contractor badge on a lanyard, plain civilian blouse, slacks, a single bourbon, barely touched, positioned on her left, the offhand, back to the wall, facing the room. She had been in that booth for 40 minutes and had not once had her back to an uncovered door. When she looked up, she held Bracken's eyes from across the room without strain, without shift, without the micro-flinch that most civilians produce when they find themselves the subject of a public performance. She held them for a beat. 2. Then she spoke. Widowmaker. 1 word. Flat. The NATO phonetic for the W, dropped into the call sign's radio format the way someone drops their own name, without thinking about it, because it is simply true. No flourish. No anger. No theater. Bracken's glass tilted. Ice water hit the barroom floor with a sound the whole room heard. The laughter died on a breath. The junior Marines went still. 2 other patrons glanced over. The bartender did not move. The room had been aimed at a civilian woman for a laugh, and the civilian woman had turned it around with a single syllable. And now, no one in the room was entirely sure what had just happened, except for one man at the far end of the bar who had gone very still and very quiet, and set his beer on the counter with the particular careful deliberateness of someone who has just recognized something he was not expecting to see. Master Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Vance, 57 years old, 34 years in the Marine Corps, Special Operations Liaison for Headquarters Marine Corps. He had not moved. He watched her hold eye contact with Bracken, and then, without breaking that contact, her gaze completed a slow and unhurried circuit of the room. Main door, the corridor beyond, the faces at the adjacent tables, the window behind her, the side exit. Back to Bracken. The entire loop took 4 seconds and produced no interruption in her composure, no acceleration in her breathing, no blink. It was so smooth it could have been mistaken for a glance away in discomfort, except that she did not look away in discomfort. She looked with the quiet, methodical precision of someone who has cataloged every exit in every room she has entered for the past 8 years. Vance caught it. His chin dipped a fraction. He picked up his beer and turned back to the counter. His eyes tracked her in the mirror above the bottles. Bracken recovered by volume. He told his Marines she had read it off a movie poster, probably worked in the contractor office, overheard someone use the word. Stolen valor in a blouse, boys. The laughter came back, thinner than before. He glanced at her once more. She had not moved. Her glass was in the same position. Her eyes were on the middle distance, focused on nothing and everything at once, the way eyes look when they are not resting, but working. He turned back to his circle. Something had snagged in him. Not fear. Not respect. Something closer to the particular irritation of a man who has aimed a weapon and found the target has not fallen. He was not accustomed to this. He had spent 17 years perfecting the performance of institutional dominance, the particular authority of a senior NCO in a room full of people who need something from him, the way a Geist-Oiget can fill a space and make everyone in it aware of the filling. He was good at it. He used it constantly. And the woman in the booth had not only failed to respond to it, but had somehow made the room quieter in a way that cost him ground he hadn't offered. It snagged. It would become something. That was his first mistake, not the insult, but the decision to keep going. Vance ordered another beer he didn't intend to drink. He stood at the bar for 20 more minutes, cataloging without consciously deciding to. Back to the wall, facing the room, every approach vector visible. No one behind her. Glass on the offhand throughout. Dominant hand free, every minute of the 40-minute sit. Single bourbon barely touched. Ice barely shifted in 90 minutes. Alcohol discipline undercover. Reaction capacity intact. No flinch when Bracken's Marine bumped the entrance door behind the group. And the call sign, NATO phonetic for the W, the standard radio format for a call sign designation. Not a phrase someone repeats from a movie, a call sign in the radio sense, delivered by the body of someone who has used it on a radio. He had spent 34 years reading Marines. He knew what he was looking at. He just hadn't expected to find it behind a contractor badge. He slid off the bar stool, walked to the back corridor. Old habit, not a plan. Cell phone in his hand before he cleared the corner. A number he hadn't dialed in 2 years. He looked at it. He did not dial yet. He stood in the corridor holding the phone, and what he was thinking about was not the guys who had made a fool of himself in front of his own Marines. What he was thinking about was what it meant if the woman in the booth was who he thought she was, and what it would mean for Bracken if she was. He stood there a long time. The phone stayed in his pocket. He would need a different number, a more careful one. Thursday morning, 0830 hours. Administrative Annex, a borrowed office with fluorescent lights and a sign outside reading Behavioral Health Contractor, Appointments Only. Hartigan at the desk, contractor badge, plain blouse, a stack of pre-deployment psychological evaluation forms, a coffee cup positioned precisely on the left side of the desk. Corporal Reyes, 22 years old, sat across from her completing a standard screening. The questions came at measured intervals, calibrated to produce stress indicators that Reyes had no idea he was revealing. She watched the micro-tensions in his jawline, the way his eyes tracked left when she asked about unit cohesion. The breath held a half-second too long before he answered questions about his platoon commander. The data was clinical and exact. She had run 47 of these screenings in 6 months. Every one of them real. Every one of them documented and filed and entered into the administrative system under her contractor credentials, because the cover was not decorative, it was load-bearing, and she had built it to hold weight. And then, without inflection, without setup. Last deployment. What was your unit's QRF response window at Lemonier? Camp Lemonier, Djibouti. The forward operating base that fed the Horn logistics chain, a name that lived in the operational vocabulary of anyone who had moved through the Horn and nowhere else. Reyes answered without processing why a civilian behavioral health contractor knew it by instinct. His eyes went to the desk for a fraction of a second. She noted the flicker. He looked at the floor when he left. Bracken arrived at 9:15 with a lance corporal and a clipboard, ostensibly about a scheduling conflict. He lingered. He looked at the office, the coffee cup on the left, the closed folder at her right hand, the particular way she had angled her chair. He was running another test, deciding whether the word in the bar had been a fluke or something requiring explanation. So what's your specialty, Doc? Therapy? Social work? Because last night you sounded like you'd been watching too many military movies. She looked up from the evaluation form. She did not stop writing. She held his gaze, and the tell fired, smooth and automatic. Her eyes completed the quiet, clockwise circuit of the room, beginning at the door behind Bracken, tracking to his lance corporal's hands, to the window, to the corridor visible through the open door, and returning to Bracken's face in a single unhurried arc, without interruption and without a blink. The motion had the character of a reflex, not performed, not deliberate, as automatic as breathing, because it had been burned into the body over years in rooms where the cost of not doing it was permanent. She had done it twice since he walked through the door. he had not noticed once. Bracken was talking about the range, a flagged MAC-18 CQBR with a barrel erosion issue, his terrain, his domain, his test. He expected a nod. She closed the evaluation folder. BCG to chamber gap. If it's past 0.04 of an inch on a 10.5-inch upper, you're going to see inconsistent gas timing by the 1200 round mark. Leupold 1.8 or Geisel amount on that platform. The torque spec differs by 4 inch-pounds. Bracken stared. His lance corporal stared. A specific barrel erosion tolerance. A specific round count. A specific optic comparison. Cited the way someone cites a phone number without searching, because the number is simply there, written into the body by rote and repetition, and the particular discipline of someone who has carried these systems into places where getting the number wrong has a different kind of cost. Where'd you read that? She opened the folder again. The manual. He left. He told himself she had Googled the details after Wednesday night. Told it loudly, to his Marines, on the range that afternoon. Rebuilt the narrative. Reframed the encounter. Decided aloud that anyone could memorize a spec sheet if they were motivated enough by embarrassment. His Marines laughed on cue. A lance corporal named Garrett pulled out a phone and took a screenshot from the base contractor directory and typed the first caption. The post was live by 2100 hours. 43 reactions in the first hour. The group chat that Bracken moderated and seeded and watched like a garden. In his personal vehicle off base that evening, Vance called a number he was careful about. Not asking you to pull a file, sir. I'm asking whether the call sign WIDOWMAKER is still active on the task force roster. A pause that lasted 4 seconds, long enough to mean something. Copy. No further. I'll handle it from here. He hung up. His jaw set the way senior NCOs set their jaws when they have confirmed something they wished hadn't needed confirming. He looked at his phone. He had a second number. He had not dialed it yet. He sat in the dark of his car for a long time, engine off, watching the base lights through the windshield before he drove back to base and said nothing to anyone. Thursday evening. Hardigan in her temporary quarters, encrypted phone in hand. A screenshot forwarded by her counterintelligence handler. Her contractor directory headshot. Captioned, "Stolen Valor Civilian Poser." 43 reactions, 11 laughing emojis. A dozen mock alternatives to a call sign they believed was borrowed. She looked at the screenshot for exactly 2 seconds. Opened a second application. Typed one line. Digital harassment campaign initiated. Screenshot time-stamped. Thursday, 7th of May, 21:06. She set the phone face down. Her eyes completed the slow loop, window, door, the parking lot visible below. Automatic, unhurried, the way a heart beats. The notebook on the desk had 2 sections. The front was behavioral health case files. The back was something else entirely. Friday morning. 2 lance corporals from Bracken's range detail passed her office doorway. One said loudly that he was checking in for his appointment with Princess Cupcake. The other nearly covered the laugh. It was a performance, aimed at her, intended to land in her hearing, calibrated by someone who understood the particular cruelty of informal harassment on a closed installation. No official record, no paper trail, just the accumulated weight of being made small in the hallways you have to walk every day. Corporal Reyes was 3 feet away in the corridor. He did not laugh. He looked at the floor. Hardigan was at the coffee machine. She poured her cup without reacting, without a flush in the face, without a pause in the pour, without any of the small physical tells that reveal a person who has been hit. Opened the notebook and wrote down their names, visible on their ID lanyards, the time, and the exact words used. Not because she needed revenge, because documentation is the first act of justice, and she had been building this case since November. Staff Sergeant Holt arrived at her office without an appointment at 10:45, citing a mandatory rescheduling. He lingered, looked at the desk, looked at the walls, looked at the filing cabinet, looked at the single window, making a slow inventory of a room he had been sent to inventory. He made a joke about her famous call sign, said "WIDOWMAKER" with air quotes and a half smile that was meant to read as casual and read instead as a man who had been sent to probe and did not know how to disguise it. The tell fired. As he spoke, her eyes ran the door, his hands, the corridor, the door again. Smooth, continuous, returning to his face without interruption. She had been watching his hands the entire time. "Sergeant Holt, you're not on today's screening roster. If you'd like to schedule, the duty clerk can add you for Monday at 0800. If you'd prefer not to wait, I can note in the system that you declined your pre-deployment behavioral evaluation. Your battalion CO will receive that notation by end of day." Holt left. Quickly. By Friday evening, she had 42 documented incidents, 42 data points, in a case that Bracken believed was a game he was winning. The notebook was open on the desk, behavioral health notes on the left, incident codes on the right, and beside it, an encrypted tablet displaying what appeared to be a scheduling matrix and was, in fact, a movement pattern log tracking Bracken's location, his associates' base pass check-in times, and a string of off-base phone numbers flagged against a Treasury intelligence sharing database. She photographed 3 pages and sent the file to her handler, closed the notebook, set it flat, clipped the pen to the cover. 42 incidents. 42 documented acts committed by a man who had no idea that the woman he was performing for was the most meticulous recorder he had ever been in a room with, and that every incident was going to a case file he would one day read in a courtroom. The woman being called Princess Cupcake in that corridor held a classified citation in a locked drawer and had documented 42 acts of harassment from an NCO she was simultaneously investigating for espionage. The notebook, the encrypted tablet, the timestamps, the names on the lanyards, 42 acts he committed believing the room was watching him win. If that made your jaw clench, stay with it. You're going to want to be in the room when the door finally closes on him. She looked up from the desk. What was on her face was not anger, not satisfaction, not distress. It was the still, focused calm of someone who has been in rooms with much worse than Bracken, and who knows, with complete certainty, what comes next. She did not say a word. Friday afternoon, approximately 1400 hours. A base access office clerk arrived at the administrative annex, polite, apologetic, the particular careful manner of someone delivering news they did not create. Pending review of a formal complaint, her contractor credentials were temporarily suspended. 48 hours maximum. She must vacate the annex. Copy. Who filed the complaint? I can't say, ma'am. Pending review. She nodded. She picked up her personal phone and sent one encrypted line to her handler. System attack initiated. Trigger contingency timeline. The tell fired as the clerk walked away. Door, corridor, the retreating back, the parking lot through the window. She held on the lot 2 seconds longer than the rest. A credential suspension, on its own, meant nothing except that the man who filed it had documented his own awareness of her. That awareness was a thread. She had learned in the Hadramaut Highlands that one thread was enough, and she had learned to pull carefully. The 9-hour suspension was, from Bracken's perspective, a neutralizing strike. He had aimed institutional leverage at the woman and connected. What he did not know was that while he watched for her reaction, a JSOS counterintelligence detachment was moving 2 surveillance assets into position. One into the base housing registry, one onto the recruiter administrative network. By 2300 hours Friday, the CI team had confirmed Bracken's digital connection to an offshore numbered account and identified a second contact in the recruiter administrative chain, a staff sergeant in the administrative processing section, whose access to the pre-deployment manifest system had no plausible explanation attached to his duty position. His complaint had handed her team the clearest operational window of the 6-month assignment. He had aimed his weapon at the wrong target. Every minute he spent watching her was a minute he wasn't watching them. Every hour he celebrated her being locked out of the annex was an hour her detachment moved without interference. He had given them 9 clean hours and called it a victory. She spent those 9 hours in her quarters reading a physical personnel file. She was not wasting time. She was doing the rest of her job. Saturday morning, 1100 hours. Encrypted ping. A plant had occurred in the contractor parking lot. She approached her vehicle at 11:45, circled it once without touching it. A corner of a manila envelope visible through the rear windshield, an angle only visible approaching from the annex building, which meant the person who placed it had known her approach route, had anticipated her sightline, had done rudimentary surveillance, and gotten the angle wrong by 3 degrees, because the approach she actually used was not the one listed in her contractor parking form. Small error, the kind of error that a man who has never done this for real makes when he thinks he's running an operation and is actually running an impression of one. She photographed the vehicle and the envelope position from 3 angles, documenting the placement angle and the sightline discrepancy. Opened the door with gloved hands. Inside, 8 printed photographs of a woman resembling her, appearing to surveil children at the MCB elementary school with a telephoto lens. Timestamps placed on Tuesday, before she had sat down at the bar Wednesday night. She looked at the photographs for one deliberate count, then into the concealed mic on her watch. Vehicle plant, 1 envelope, 8 prints. Timestamp inconsistency on photos 3, 4, and 7. Background light angle does not match the stated time. Serial number on the Nikon D800 body visible in frame 4 is a retail unit, not a government-issued designation. Package photographed in place, releasing to CI lead. She had named the camera Body by Model Designation. Identified a timestamp inconsistency by lens compression mechanics. Said serial number instead of model by reflex. She did not notice she had done it. That was how deep the training went. Not as performance, not as display, but as the simple automatic precision of a mind that has been shaped by years into something that cannot be switched off. That evening, a sealed envelope appeared under her door. She read the single-typed page inside twice, folded it along the original crease, set it on the desk. The buyer had confirmed a new manifest request. The operational window was 48 hours. She looked at the window. The light outside was going dark. She did not touch the drawer. She stood at the desk for a long moment, perfectly still, looking at nothing. The way someone looks at nothing when they are looking at everything inside their own head, running the timeline, checking the variables, confirming that the sequence she had built over 6 months was going to close the way she designed it to close. Then she turned off the light. In the contractor parking lot that afternoon, Vance had sat in his personal vehicle and watched the envelope being planted in her car. He did not intervene. He had made his decision on Sunday, and he was not going to unmake it now. He watched her walk away across the lot afterward, gait unchanged, shoulders square, pace unhurried, and what was on his face was the expression of a man who has confirmed the second thing he did not want to have to confirm. "She's already made the package," he said quietly, to no one. "She's just waiting." Saturday morning. HQMC Special Operations Liaison Office, door closed. Vance pulled the JSOC Task Force call sign roster from a classified archive he had legitimate access to. He had served as senior enlisted advisor on that task force from 2023 to 2025. He searched the call sign. WIDOWMAKER was on the roster. Status notation: detached for covert internal tasking, November 2025. Contact through JSOC CI channel only. He read the line 3 times. He did not print it. He closed the terminal. He had looked up the call sign not to confirm whether she was real. He already knew she was real. He looked it up to confirm how serious the situation had become, because a major on a covert internal tasking does not need a master gunnery sergeant's help. She needs everyone to stay out of the lane. Saturday afternoon, his personal vehicle, off base. He called a retired colonel with connections to HQMC Special Operations, the kind of relationship built over 20 years of honest counsel and enough shared deployments that neither man wasted words. Not asking you to burn anything, sir. I'm asking whether a female major attached to JSOC, call sign WIDOWMAKER, is running a covert internal tasking at Pendleton right now. A long pause. Copy. I understand that. Another pause. I understand. Walk away. Understood, sir. He stared at the phone after hanging up. The words walk away sat in the air of the car. He set the phone on the dash and looked at the base perimeter fence through the windshield. The answer to whether she needed help was no. The answer to whether he should stay out of it was yes. He had spent 34 years following the right answer. This time, he made a different choice, not because she needed him, but because there was a part to play when the moment came. He knew what it was. Later, from a vantage point overlooking the parade ground, he watched Bracken cross below with 2 range Marines, laughing at something on his phone. Something clicked into place. The formal complaint had not been simple irritation. The planted photographs were not the act of a man who felt disrespected and wanted to embarrass someone. Bracken was running interference, escalating against someone some animal part of him had identified as a threat to something worth protecting. He didn't know who she was. Some part of him knew she was dangerous. Every escalation carried the pattern of a man trying to make a problem disappear before he fully understood what the problem was. That evening, Vance sat alone at the officers' club bar, her booth empty across the room, and walked back through the Wednesday night scene in memory, systematically. Back to the wall, every approach vector visible, no one positioned behind her. Glass on the offhand, dominant hand, free throughout the entire 90-minute sit. Single bourbon, barely moved, ice barely shifted, alcohol discipline under operational conditions, maintaining reaction capacity while holding cover. No flinch when the entrance door banged behind Bracken's group at performance volume. The scan, smooth, complete, clockwise, returning without a blink. The steady hand when Bracken's voice rose and 2 tables turned to look. Every habit, every physical choice, the accumulated muscle memory of someone who had spent years in environments where those choices were the difference between coming home and not. She had never looked like a contractor. The body could not be hidden the way the badge could be hidden. The body always told the truth, to anyone who knew how to read it. He had known how to read it for 34 years. He had just never expected to walk into a bar on a Wednesday night and find someone reading the same language. Sunday morning, he stood at the edge of the parade ground, Bracken visible near the range building 50 yards across the asphalt. He could walk over, pull him aside, tell him to back off, spare the guy what was coming. He had done that for Marines before, when there was still something to save. When the man in question was someone whose worst instincts had gotten temporarily ahead of his better ones, and a word in private at the right moment could redirect the whole thing. He had been that man for a dozen Marines over 34 years. He had pulled people back from the edge of their own worst decisions and never said a word about it to anyone. He looked at Bracken for a long count, watched him laugh at his phone, watched the 2 range Marines match the laugh without knowing what they were laughing at, because that was what you did around a guy who was in a good mood. Bracken was in a good mood because he thought he had won. He had not won. He had triggered a federal investigation handed a counterintelligence team a 9-hour operational window, and planted fabricated evidence on a federal installation on camera. He had been in a good mood for 5 days while the machinery closed around him. There was nothing left to redirect. "You earned this, son," he said quietly. He turned and walked the other direction. Subscribe to Honor Tales. What he confirmed on that phone call is the reason she walked onto this installation in November, and what comes next is the reason she stayed. Saturday night. VOQ room, edge of the base, standard institutional furniture, a single window facing the parking lot, the marine layer coming in off the Pacific, so the harbor lights were soft and indistinct through the gray. 6 months on this installation, 2 trips to the DFAC, 1 to the PX. Every other evening at this desk, or at the officers' club with a single bourbon that lasted the whole night. She opened the locked drawer. 4 objects, arranged the way someone arranges things they cannot afford to lose track of. A challenge coin, worn bronze, the JSOC Task Force crest on one face, a skull with a crossed rifle and anchor on the other. The metal darkened along the edges from handling, not display handling, use handling, the kind that comes from reaching for something in the dark without looking because the weight of it is familiar. A folded photograph, 3 men in full kit, pre-mission, somewhere pale and heat-bleached. The man on the left was grinning. The man in the center had his hand on the man on the right's shoulder. Captain Avery Donlin. Gunnery Sergeant Hosea Merrick. Sergeant Wilder Quint. A single handwritten page, signed at the bottom in barely legible script by Corporal Dana Ewan, the surviving assessor, written from a hospital bed in Landstuhl 14 months ago. The fold lines were white from handling. She had read it many times. She could recite it without looking. An unframed citation. Classified stamp across the top. 2 paragraphs of redacted text. And below the redactions, 3 words. Distinguished Service Cross. She looked at all 4 without touching them. 3 names. She had said them in order every morning since March 15th, 2024, so she would not stop counting. Donlin, Marek, Quint. March 2024. Yemen, Hadramaut Highlands. A hostage recovery mission, 1 surviving assessor, an intelligence officer captured during a field assessment in the Marib Basin. Her team inserted at 0200 local. 4 operators plus an extraction element. The intelligence said the compound was lightly guarded. The intelligence was wrong. The ambush hit on the exfiltration route, 3 kilometers from the landing zone. They came from the east drainage, the direction the pre-deployment manifest said was clear. Donlin went first. Merrick 30 seconds later, covering the casualty drag. Quint at the rear of the column, buying the 60 seconds they needed. She had Ewan on her back, and 2 rifles firing from the drainage, and 60 seconds, and no margin. They walked out. The others did not. She had been 28 years old. She had been a major for 4 months. The ambush could not have happened without foreknowledge of the exfil route. The route was in the pre-deployment manifest, a document distributed through the standard MARSOC administrative channel, a channel that touched a recruiter clerk's desk in the continental United States. The trail was 14 months of counterintelligence work across 4 agencies. At the end of it, a numbered Gulf account, a shell entity in Djibouti, and a name. Hadi al-Rasul. AQAP Financial Facilitation. Gulf of Aden Basin. The DIA analyst who traced the account told her the per-line item price for a pre-deployment manifest, $57. 3 Marines had died because someone needed money and someone else needed intelligence. Someone who needed money was on this installation. The someone who needed intelligence was in Aden. She had not forgotten which one mattered more. Philippines, September 2023. A night recovery action north of Zamboanga. 2 SEALs and a Marine raider held in a coastal compound. 3 operators, 9 guards, a 120-meter approach corridor with no natural cover after the 30-meter mark. She went in alone on the approach, neutralized the guard element in a 40-second window, using 4 rounds at ranges between 8 and 22 meters, and walked the assessment element to the landing zone without using her radio once, because radio traffic in that corridor, at that hour, would have ended the mission in the first 30 seconds. The next morning at the FOB, one of the SEALs wrote WIDOWMAKER on the operations board in dry erase marker and circled it. Nobody argued. She hadn't chosen it. They gave it to her. A call sign is a promise to the people who gave it to you. She did not break promises. The encrypted phone on the desk buzzed once. 1 message, 2 lines, no sender name. Package confirmed. Buyer active. Execute within 48. She read it once, closed the app, set the phone face down, looked at the photograph of 3 men in kit. 48 hours, close enough to smell. She stood. She did not pick up the coin or the photograph. She locked the drawer, dropped the key in her pocket, and crossed to the window. The parking lot below was empty, the base quiet under the fog. She looked at her own reflection in the glass for a long moment. No contractor badge, no civilian blouse, just a 30-year-old woman in a plain t-shirt who had been carrying 3 names for 14 months. Then she turned off the light. Sunday mid-morning, contractor parking lot. Bracken sent Lance Corporal Garrett to the vehicle, while Bracken engaged the lot attendant in a conversation about a range scheduling conflict. Garrett planted the envelope in under 90 seconds. Clean. Or so it appeared. Bracken watched from the far edge of the maintenance road and told himself that after this, the civilian woman with the borrowed call sign would be escorted off the installation under suspicion, substantial enough that no contractor administrator would reinstate her. He had done the math. He had run harder operations than this. A planted evidence package was simple work. What Bracken did not know, the secondary CCTV camera mounted on the maintenance shed overhang, listed as inactive in the base access system, listed as non-operational in the base maintenance log, listed as pending replacement in a work order filed 18 months ago and never completed, had been reactivated by the JSOC CI detachment the previous Friday. A single technician, 20 minutes, no record in the access log. Every frame recorded. Garrett's face, clear, 3/4 angle. Enough resolution to make a positive identification in under 5 seconds. Bracken's personal truck visible on the maintenance road. License plate visible. Time-stamped. The envelope going into the vehicle. The angle of approach. The duration of the plant. The glove he forgot to wear on his left hand when he adjusted the envelope position through the rear window. All of it admissible. Every frame of it admissible. She received the encrypted ping at 1100 hours. Approached her vehicle at 11:45, exactly when Bracken expected her. She circled it once without touching it. Photographed it from 4 angles with deliberate precision. Opened the door with gloved hands. Opened the envelope. Photographed the contents in place without removing them. Spoke quietly into the concealed mic on her watch. Vehicle plant. 1 envelope, 8 prints. Timestamp inconsistency on photos, 3, 4, and 7. Package documented in place. Releasing to CI lead. The tel fired as she straightened. Parking lot. Maintenance shed. The camera mount she had identified on her 3rd day on the installation. Bracken's position at the far edge of the maintenance road. The building exits. Smooth, unhurried, automatic. She had been tracking him since he walked into the lot. The circuit completed and returned without interruption, without a blink. The same motion every 90 seconds for 6 months, and now it was the last time she would perform it in a contractor badge. She had needed him to do exactly this, because now it was not surveillance logs and financial records. Now it was a crime committed on a federal military installation, against a person covered by contractor protection statutes. Now it was UCMJ, and UCMJ was the key that opened the drawer that held the rest of his life. She straightened, closed the vehicle door, and across the lot found Bracken watching from the maintenance road, certain she would be rattled, waiting to see the first crack in her composure. She looked up and held his gaze across the lot. And then, for the first time in 6 months, the only time, she smiled. Small, private, almost amused. It did not reach the full face. It was the expression of someone watching a final piece fall into place after 14 months of waiting for exactly this kind of patience to matter. She turned and walked back toward the annex. In a rented minivan 2 streets outside the base gate, the JSOC CI detachment lead reviewed the CCTV footage on a laptop. She ran the footage twice, once at standard speed, once at half speed, confirming the facial angle and plate visibility. Facial match on Garrett. Vehicle match on Bracken's truck. She picked up her phone. "We have the plant on camera. Moving on his quarters tonight. We're done here." She closed the laptop. The trap had been set in November. The jaws closed on a Sunday morning in May. Bracken watched the annex door close behind her. He stood in the quiet lot, replaying that small, private smile. He told himself she hadn't understood what the envelope was. He told himself she'd open it later and fall apart. He told himself the smile was nerves. He did not fully believe any of it. The maintenance shed camera blinked its small red light in the shadow of the overhang, a camera he had walked past many times, never once looking up. He stood in the empty lot for a long time. What was sitting beneath his sternum was not irritation. He didn't have a name for it yet. But it had the shape of something he could not undo. Friday morning, 9th of May, 2026. 0900 hours. Officers Club Bar, MCB Camp Pendleton. The same room, the same corner booth, the same woman, contractor badge, plain civilian blouse, slacks, back to the wall, left hand resting on a closed folder. Coffee in front of her, untouched. The room was quieter than it had been Wednesday night and not empty. 6 or 7 officers and senior NCOs at tables, and the bar, present for reasons that ranged from routine morning coffee to the particular quiet alertness of people who have been told something significant is about to happen and have chosen their positions accordingly. Sergeant Major Ruiz, 48, at a center table with a legal pad, and the expression of a man who has been told the shape of what he is about to witness and has decided he will watch it with his full attention. 2 Marine CID investigators in plain clothes at a corner table near the door, a couple of men nursing coffee, newspapers untouched, eyes doing the same kind of quiet work hers were doing. A JSOC liaison in the far corner with collar tabs that Bracken, when he entered at 9:12 in service Charlie's, squared away and ready to perform his way through a contractor harassment complaint, did not recognize. He had spotted her in the booth. His jaw tightened. He sat across from Ruiz. He still believed this was a game he could win. He had 34 years of Marine Corps and the institutional confidence of a man who has never been the one in the room without a uniform. He did not yet understand that the uniform is only a shield if you have been wearing it correctly. At 22 minutes past 9, the side door opened. Master Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Vance entered in service Charlie's. Not ordered, not sanctioned. His own decision, made on a Sunday afternoon overlooking a parade ground, carried forward for 5 days without deviation. He crossed the barroom floor with the measured pace of a man who does not require anyone's permission, unhurried, deliberate, the pace of 34 years in rooms where the wrong speed is its own kind of statement. The room went quieter in the way rooms go quiet when something real is about to happen, when everyone present understands they are about to witness something that will be discussed in this building long after today. He reached her booth. He came to full attention, heels together, chin level, chest out, and addressed her directly in a voice that carried. "Major Hardigan, ma'am. Widowmaker. Confirmed." The room went still, and the tell fired, final, definitive, visible to everyone present. She held Vance's gaze, and her eyes completed one last deliberate circuit. Main door, Bracken, the CID table, the JSOC liaison in the corner, the side exit, smooth and unhurried, returning to Vance in a single arc without interruption, without a blink. The whole room could see it, and for the first time, they knew what they were looking at. They had been watching her do it since Wednesday night. They just hadn't known what it was. Bracken's mouth opened. A master gunnery sergeant was calling a civilian contractor major. He looked at her contractor badge. He looked at Ruiz. Ruiz had gone very still. At 22 minutes and 40 seconds past 9, the main doors opened. Brigadier General Eunice Tarn, 52, Deputy Commander Marine Corps Forces, Special Operations Command, entered in service alphas, full ribbon rack, rank insignia. The posture of a woman who has spent 30 years making rooms, understand what authority looks like. The room came to its feet. She crossed to the corner booth without pausing. She stopped in front of Hardigan. She rendered a full, deliberate, formal salute, not required by protocol, not mandated by procedure, rendered in front of witnesses as an unambiguous public declaration. "Major Hardigan, on behalf of Marine Corps Forces, Special Operations Command, well done." Hardigan stood. She returned the salute once, brief, precise, exactly as required. Then she looked to the CID investigators at the corner table. "Gunnery Sergeant Bracken." Her voice was quiet. "He's yours." Confusion on Bracken's face, then disbelief. A general salute. A general salute. She has a general salute. And then recognition arriving like a building collapse, beam by beam. The office, the screening questions that were too precise, Camp Lemonnier mentioned by reflex, the barrel erosion tolerance, the 9-hour window his complaint had created, and what a counterintelligence detachment had done with it, what must have happened to his quarters Sunday night. And then horror, the parking lot camera on the maintenance shed overhang, the group chat, the planted photographs, the notebook she never once stopped writing in. "How long has she?" A CID investigator placed a hand on his shoulder. "Gunnery Sergeant Bracken, you are being detained under Article 30, Uniform Code of Military Justice. You have the right to remain silent." He had made it 34 years on the understanding that the uniform was a shield. He had been right. He just hadn't been the one wearing it correctly. 2 CID investigators walked him toward the exit. Hardigan did not watch with triumph. Her eyes tracked him with the precise, cataloging focus of a report being completed, across the barroom floor, to the threshold, to the door. Then her gaze returned to the closed folder on the table. She opened it. She resumed reading. Bijan Tarn paused at the door on her way out and glanced back once, at the woman still reading in the corner booth, back to the wall, hand at her left side. Then the door closed. Within 72 hours of the arrest, the machinery ran at full speed. Bracken's hard drive, 11 months of pre-deployment manifest sales, 41 individual Marine operators compromised, revenue traced through a Djibouti shell entity to a numbered Gulf account, confirmed as an AQAP financial facilitation node, Hadi al-Rasul's network. 41 operators recalled, repositioned, reissued covers. 11 months of compromised manifests, voided in the quiet, total way that damage control happens, when the people running it have been ready for it. When the case has been built brick by brick over 6 months by a woman in a contractor badge who wrote everything down. 4 NCOs across MCB Camp Pendleton and MCB Quantico, formally charged under UCMJ Article 106, a staff sergeant, 2 sergeants, and Lance Corporal Garrett, Bracken's runner. 3 civilian contractors detained, 2 in the recruiter administrative network, 1 in the base access office, who had facilitated the 9-hour credential suspension that he believed was a winning move, and that had, in fact, been the moment the net closed. Bracken in pre-trial confinement, pending his Article 32 hearing. The word espionage sat flat in the charging document, unadorned, the way words sit when they have enough weight to stand without emphasis. The upstream connection closed the loop that had been open since March of 2024. The numbered Gulf account traced through 2 shell entities and terminated at a documented AQIP financial facilitation node in the Aden Port District, Hadi al-Rasul. The same network, the same financier, the same 40-meter drainage in the Hadramaut Highlands, where 3 Marines had gone down on an exfil route that someone in the continental United States had sold for $57 a line. 14 months of counterintelligence work. 6 months undercover at Camp Pendleton. 1 word in a bar room on a Wednesday night. The loop was closed, publicly. A Marine guy arrested on federal charges. Quietly, 3 KIAs from a classified operation now connected to the man still at large, and that man's name on a list that people with significant authority were reading with full attention. The following week, administrative annex, the duty clerk's counter. Corporal Reyes stood with a form in his hand, a formal voluntary statement. He had documented what he witnessed in the corridor, the names on the lanyards, the words, the exact times. And one detail the investigation had not yet confirmed. On Thursday morning, the 7th of May, he had seen Isaac Bracken photographing the contractor directory headshot board in the main administrative office. He hadn't known what it meant at the time. Now he did. He had come in on his own. No one had told him to. He was 22 years old, and he had looked at the floor instead of laughing in that corridor. And a week later, he had walked back into the same building and told the truth, because the floor was a temporary decision, and the truth was a permanent one. That mattered. In ways he would never be officially told, it mattered enormously. 1 Marine, in a hallway, on a Thursday morning, who chose to come back. If you stayed all the way to the salute, subscribe. There's another mission queued, and the next operator is already in position. A quiet Saturday evening. VOQ room, MCB Camp Pendleton. Hardigan at the desk. The notebook closed. The drawer locked. The contractor badge hanging from the hook by the door. Its last day on that hook. The lanyard still. The badge facing the wall, as though the cover itself was done and knew it. Outside, the Marine layer had come in off the Pacific, and the base was wrapped in coastal fog, harbor lights barely visible through the gray. The kind of fog that erases distance, that makes the world smaller and quieter and more contained, the kind she had learned, in rooms far from here, to find useful, because fog has always been better cover than daylight. The encrypted phone buzzed once, sharp and brief. She read the message. No name, no signature. The stripped-down format of a coded field greeting between operators who have known each other in the dark. WIDOWMAKER is still standing. Hadi is in Aden. She held the phone for a moment, set it face down on the desk, looked at the window, the fog, the distant harbor light, the Pacific beyond it, and 7,000 miles southeast across that water, the Gulf of Aden. She looked for a long time. 3 names, carried for 14 months. 1 network, dismantled in 72 hours. 1 name still standing in a city on the water at the far end of the world. She had been patient once before, 6 months in a contractor badge, in a borrowed office with fluorescent lights, building a case 1 incident code at a time. She knew how to do patience. She knew how to carry something across a long distance and arrive with it intact. She would do it again. She stood. She did not touch the drawer. She crossed to the window and looked at the fog. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.